Today we're going to be looking at the Eezy S Twist, a reversible seat ultra-compact travel stroller from Cybex. The Twist is one of the smallest reversible seat models on the market and is thus quite appealing to a lot of people for both of these qualities. In addition, the Twist takes it one step further in that the seat is not only reversible, but swivels, allowing users to swap its orientation without actually disconnecting the seat frame. A function they're so proud of that they've made it the model's namesake, even though I'm pretty sure the Orbit did it first. Let's start off with a few stats. The Twist weighs in at 7.7 kilos and folds down to 58 by 45 by 27 centimeters. It can take up to 17 kilos in the seat and 5 kilos in the underslung shopping basket. Since it's such a defining feature of the model then, let's start off with the seat. The Twist doesn't have an adjustable leg rest, but it does have a full recline. At least the non-US model does. Recent regulations seem to have prohibited full reclines on most ultra-compact stateside. When facing forwards, the Twist will accommodate an older toddler in relative comfort due to its high position canopy. But the key drawback to the Twist seat though is its depth, which is a few centimeters shallower than average, made this way by necessity to facilitate that clever swivel, so that the baseboard can fit within the confines of the chassis arms. This is less of a problem in the forward-facing position where there is a footrest, but does unfortunately seriously restrict comfort for children over a year or so in the reverse-facing, parent-facing position where there is not. Without a place to easily anchor your child's feet, that shallower baseboard means that it may often seem as though your child is slipping out, held in place only by the safety harness. When we take into account that the reverse-facing position is one of the main reasons that people buy the Twist, this is actually a pretty big deal. The second key appeal of the Twist, of course, is that it is an ultra-compact. Or is it? I suppose that depends on how you define it. I like a conservative definition, that it means a stroller that folds small enough to take as carry-on luggage on an airplane. But since the majority of ultra-compacts these days seem to ignore the guidelines set by the IATA, the International Air Traffic Association, I suppose that definition might be too strict. For me, holding within these guidelines is sort of the whole point, because so much is lost in building strollers this small anyway. Bigger wheels for better drivability, sturdier materials for mechanical longevity, bigger, better seats higher off the ground, but hey, you can decide yourself. Just know that the Twist is definitely one of those ultra-compact models that does not fold down sufficiently small enough to fit within the cabin luggage requirements of the vast majority of airlines, and at the same time is also absolutely one of those models to have sacrificed all these characteristics and more in the attempt. Folding down the Twist is a bit of a scary affair, in all honesty, involving a wide variety of hinged bars and internally locking and unlocking mechanisms that often seem to me as though they're on the verge of breaking if you apply just that extra little bit of pressure. I'll explain this in more detail in a moment when we go over the mechanics of the Twist top to bottom. But for now, I'd like to make one more note on comfort and functionality with the Twist. Another negative, unfortunately, concerning drivability. You see, all those fragile mechanisms I just talked about do not only impact folding. The Twist chassis as a whole feels pretty fragile when driving as well. There are just too many hinged points that not only feel loose from the outset, but are likely to get even looser over time as the rivets holding the Twist connection points start to weaken. Compounding this problem is a further flaw, the Twist's loosely fitted front wheels. With ultra-compacts in general, it's a good idea to stick to smoother terrain. They just don't have the suspension and wheel size to handle cobblestones or dirt roads with any sort of grace. But this rule is especially true of the Twist, because those loose front wheels are apt to get hung up sideways over even lighter bumps and rocks, forcing you to push and pull that relatively weak chassis more than you would otherwise need to, in order to keep it rolling. Let's take a closer look at the Twist, top to bottom, and you can see what I'm talking about. We're going to start off by talking about the folding mechanisms and sort of the overall structure of the chassis in general. In particular with ultra-compacts, the chassis and the way it's structured is very much determined by how it folds down because they're trying to achieve that extra small airline-capable fold, more or less, right? So the way this thing folds down, you have two mechanisms that function in much the same way. One is a button here at the handle, and the other is a handle here on the seat. And both of these are going to release points down at a joint here, holding sort of the key pair of bars in both cases. Here's these two bars, and here's these two, at the angle at which the whole thing is folded upright. And so when you release that, this is the only locking point. It unlocks, and then all of the rest of the points along the chassis, or in this case on the seat, are hinged and will be able to fold together. So a couple things about this. Firstly, this sort of an internal mechanism here is based on like a wire that runs down from this portion of the mechanism to this portion of the mechanism, connected to very small plastic parts. And what I've noticed over time with this sort of a system is that those small plastic parts that hold the wire can tend to break after a few years. All depends on sort of how you use your stroller and stuff. But when asymmetrical looseness starts to occur in the chassis, one is generally being pulled a little bit harder than the other one, or one might get stuck, and then you can tend to have sort of damage and breakage inside there. Second part of this is that there are quite a few of these hinged points that do not lock, both on the seat and the chassis, and these are all a bit loose and rickety from the outset, and are not built in a particularly sturdy fashion. A lot of them are actually riveted. Some of them do have screws, which is nice because then you can at least tighten them. But other ones do have rivets, in which case you can't. You would have to re-rivet them if the points get loose. That is also going to contribute to a sort of asymmetrical problem within the stroller, as some parts, some of those hinge points tend to wear down a little bit faster than other ones. And just overall, you can expect all of those points to loosen up over time. Again, depending on how hard you use your stroller, but still, it's pretty rickety from the outset. And then it'll just get looser and harder to use over time. There's actually a third problem then as well with the overall folding sort of system on the stroller. I'm going to fold this down in order to show you. So when it's folded down, you see this little button here. This means it's not locked in place yet. When you push it in, it's this same internally fragile mechanism that holds the stroller locked. What this means is that when you're walking around carrying the stroller, you more or less have to be a little bit protective that this locked angle is going to not have pressure to pull it apart. So you can't just walk around and carry your stroller by this bar or this bar and so on. You have to be very careful to lift and carry it all the time, which doesn't always quite work on the go, because anytime you're kind of putting extra pressure on that joint, you're risking damaging that sort of internally complex mechanism there. That's responsible, of course, both for keeping it folded down as well as keeping it folded open. We're going to have a little bit of a closer look at the lower rear frame of the Twist now, which is actually the part I feel has the least mechanical problems. It's of course the same as on the regular Eezy S. First thing that pops out to me at least is these relatively large looking suspension elements here. This is mostly for show, simply because of the size of the wheels and sort of the overall smallness of the stroller is really going to prevent you from going over any sort of rough terrain anyway. It'll simply get too bumpy. The loose front wheels also have something to do with that. But it's a nice thought anyway. They added a little bit of suspension here in the back, but it's not going to actually do that much. Moving on to the brake system, it has a nice brake system. It's this pedal here in the middle, and all that is doing is rotating a bar inside this sort of central bar here, and that's pushing out a pair of pins into these teeth on the backs of the wheels. It's a good system. It doesn't involve wires. It doesn't involve a lot of small moving parts that can break. It doesn't tend to jam up that much either. Last thing we'll talk about is the rear wheels. Rear wheels are removable. All the wheels on the Twist are removable, which is nice if you want to replace them, but has the negative factor of thus being a little bit more loose in relation to how they're connected into those wheel mounts. Over time, there is a good chance that those are going to feel a bit looser as well, unfortunately. Okay, you're going to have a little bit of a closer look at the lower front end. There is, again, a little bit of suspension in the front fork. Nice to have a little bit, but again, you won't be going over any sort of real rough terrain due to the size of the wheels. There is no swivel lock on this stroller, and in most cases, you don't necessarily need that with an ultra compact, but it would have been nice to see on the Twist since it does have this problem of loose wheels. So this is a new stroller, and you can see it's already quite loose within that wheel mounting, and it doesn't have any sort of suspension pads or anything in order to put a little bit of pressure on that fork and hold it a little bit tighter. What happens when you wind up with front wheels that don't connect tightly enough within the frontal housing on strollers with these sort of swivel wheels is that over time that axle is going to start widening out the channel inside that front housing, and it'll sit even looser in a sort of vertical sense, and this means that when you go at speed, the wheels may tend to wobble. We also have had lots of reports that these wheels have a tendency to kind of get hung up even on smaller bumps in the terrain and stuff, to get kind of hung to the side, and people have trouble maneuvering the stroller. Additionally, since the overall chassis is already a bit loose in its construction, those loose wheels are just going to make the whole thing a little bit harder to negotiate, especially over time when everything loosens up a bit more. So, should you consider getting the Eezy S Twist? Simply put, no. I wouldn't recommend it anyway. In my opinion, this stroller is designed wrong from the outset, with too much emphasis put on that useless swivel function that not only forces a too shallow baseboard, but also just adds fragile, complicated mechanisms to an already overly complex structure. If you're dead set on going Cybex for your ultra compact needs, then it's better to go with the regular Eezy S. But even then, there are better options out there. If it's a reversible seat you're after, then I'd recommend you go a tad larger. as currently there really aren't any good reversible seat ultra compacts on the market. I've got to say, I find Cybex a bit frustrating as a company in general. They seem to put so much effort into hyping their brand, but in my opinion, so far, half of their models don't live up to that hype, while the other half are astronomically overpriced. That's just my 2 cents though. In any case, we hope this video has been interesting to you, and if it has been, we ask that you subscribe, as it helps us to continue making videos in the future. Thank you.